All right. Sorry for the audio and visual delays, everyone, but this is the take two of the in lay terms episode. I'm your host, Payman Ascari. We have with us Shelly. We have back with us Shelly. So Shelly, tell us how you doing.
Doing good. Yeah, everything's a-okay out here in Alberta.
All right. It's good to hear that, and it's good to hear your voice in real time. You went on for 10 minutes and you were telling the story. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to ask you to tell us the story again, if you don't mind.
That's okay. It's kind of been my life. It encompasses most of my life for the last 4 years, anyway. So yeah, I'm. My name's Shelly. I I come from Saskatchewan originally. Uh, I've lived in northern Alberta for about 12, 13 years now, and the reason I moved to Alberta was to work for the government, MD of Greenview, and specifically uh, to be a safety officer with that company. And yeah, so just before the COVID measures took effect, I was, along with my boss, there's a bunch of people that were fired and no cause was given. They just laid us all off. And they said they didn't have to give us a reason. They paid us out and said bye. And so about 6 months, 8 months later, then COVID stuff started kicking in. So hindsight, we now know why that happened because my boss was the general manager of emergency services, so we know what they did during the fires up here, right? And he was actually a key person that wrote all the inter what do you call them intermunicipal agreements for fire services. So they wrote all these documents to help each other out, and it turns out they threw them all away during the last fires last year. And so yeah, it seems like they got rid of all the people that were competent to do things, and they kept all the people that were obliging to whatever they were told to do, right? And as we can see throughout the world, that's kind of who the people are that carried on the farce of COVID, and the order of followers, right? So yeah, my story with the COVID and the legal system is what I'm bringing to the table today, because I thought it would be really important for people to understand. If you know, I don't find a lot of people have to deal with the justice system, but we were kind of thrown into it with the COVID thing and getting tickets and lockdowns, and that's when people started to really challenge the government and ask, "What are you doing? Why? Like what?" And when we started challenging them and saying no, and disobeying their orders and their silliness, like really, because they refused to justify what they were doing. And that's when we started to learn that then they weaponized the law enforcement and the courts against us. And at the time, we're all kind of dumbfounded. At least I know I was like, "This is what are you guys doing?" It was just a very confusing time, I guess. And with me in particular, my husband got very sick. He was diagnosed with a terminal cancer, brain cancer, and he we went through the whole rigmarole with HS and for about 6 months, 8 months, and then he had to be admitted because I couldn't care for him anymore. It was too much, and he's losing his marbles, and it was way too much. So, anyways, he was admitted to a hospital in Alberta. It just so happened the day that the COVID measures took effect in 21, I think it was March 13th, and boy, that was a learning curve. Um, so my first concern with him was that they drugged him for 30 days so they didn't have to take care of him. And so I reported it. I went through their system and did things properly. And then they refused to say that anything they did was wrong. I mean, you don't drug someone just so you don't have to take care of them. That doesn't make sense. But they justified it and they said, well, and then I found out later that the drug that they gave him made it so he'd never recover. And that was pretty heartbreaking. But still, we carried on, and he went on for another 18 months after that. And I moved him to another facility, another hospital. Um, and I had some other eventful things happen. I had a bad accident with my horse, and I had a really bad bite on my face, and I had to go to the hospital while he was still in there, and so you know, I had to go there and get my dressing done, got some help with my face injury for about a week. And while I was going there, I kept asking, "Can I see him? Can I see him?" And they had these ridiculous mask orders and wouldn't let me see him, and had to make appointments and all this ridiculous stuff. And with my background, I knew that they and their policies. I always, went to, what are you guys supposed to be doing? And so I read their policies, and it turned out they were supposed to have an assessment done, a risk assessment done, that was available to the public, and it had to be specific to their facility to explain why they're restricting access, and not allowing family to visit their family in there. And so, I mean, and I never, I didn't, I always tried to be polite and everything with them. So I just sat there and waited for this document that they said they're going to get me. And then they changed their mind and called the RCMP instead, and had me hauled off in a cop car and handcuffs. And they decided that they left it up to the hospital manager if I was going to be charged or not. And then she changed her mind. It was all a big ruse to intimidate me. And again, I had done nothing wrong but ask for paperwork. And yeah, this went on for a couple more months. And yeah, so they starved him to death. That was my concern. I
I'm
called the
sorry.
RC. I called the RCMP and tried to get them to investigate. And of course, none of these people found anything wrong. And it's horrid. Like, I mean, standing outside the hospital, and you have to resign that you can't even help your own family, and they're just, it is horrid. It is horrid. But I know lots of people went through the same things that I did, because they saw the mistreatment. And it's just beyond comprehension how they could allow that to happen, but it did. So after he passed away, I had to go and take care of my property in Saskatchewan, and my mom wasn't doing well either. So I went down there, and then the situation of me getting put in jail for 8 days happened in Saskatchewan. I was going to get my mom some medication, and they didn't like that I wasn't wearing a mask in the store. And again, politely, I said no thanks to the mask. And then the store employees at the cosmetic desks were asking for my papers from a doctor. And I said, what? Like, I laughed at them, because, like, what? You can't see that even if I did have them. And then I was harassed pretty vigorously by the manager of the store. She called the owner. And then, yeah, they put me in jail for 8 days. And while I was in jail for 8 days, they reviewed those videos from my experiences in the hospital staff in Alberta, and they call me names like I'm crazy and I'm a you know conspiracy theorist. And they brought up Alex Jones and all this other, like, what? Like, this is from the RCMP. This is their brainwaves, right? They've just been completely, I don't know how they came up with this. No critical thinking skills, I guess. But yeah, so then that all led into having to deal with the justice system. And I did, I hired lawyers, and that didn't work. And then I just, over, I stopped counting at 100 encounters with the courts and the cops. And they just kept on targeting me for other things. And it hasn't quit. It's still going on today. And they currently have my family in jail in Calgary, remand since October the 11th. And he was on his way out of Saskatchewan because he couldn't take the targeting anymore. And now he stopped in Calgary at a truck stop to sleep overnight. again, apparently that's against the law in Airdrie, and they won't let him out. And they've done this before. They did it with me. So my rental property is was stolen by the bank. They did things like the bank withheld my money, and then they defaulted my loan, and then they I tried to pay it up, and then they refused the payments in person, and I tried paying online. Nope, I wasn't allowed to pay my mortgages, so they stole my house. It's not that I couldn't pay, it's that they wouldn't take it. So that mortgage was actually two of them, which included my home in Alberta. So I always had a backup plan, and but I never thought I'd have to use it. So I mean, I'm okay. I had the backup plan, but they've stolen um a whole lot from myself, and now they're going after my family. The same thing. They're in the process of stealing three of his properties, three three properties in Saskatchewan, the same town, and they won't let him out until they've finished stealing them because they're scared of us, right? And we're not violent people. We just confront them like, what are you doing? We ask questions, right? And rightly so like, holy crap, you steal our homes, you steal everything we own. And while my cousin was going through some things, my family in Saskatchewan, because they were targeting him too, we met with a lawyer in Saskatoon who told us we were on a targeted list. He told us we were on a list, and that like blew us away. Like, what? Like, and the way that I knew this was when I was in jail for the mask situation. He was one of the lawyers I phoned, and he refused to help me. He remembered me from a year prior. And like, how do you even remember me? Like, I only spoke to you on the phone for what, 20, 30 seconds? And so, from that point on, we knew that what the government was doing, and it's so outrageous that it's so hard to believe. But I mean, wow. So, after they did what they did to my husband, and they it was obvious they weren't going to have to answer for themselves. I was pretty defiant with everything, and I questioned everything that they did. So yeah, the bank stick two sets of lawyers on me. I learned, and I ran, from all of these situations, I ran into people in similar situations, and it turned out the same law firms are doing these things to the people that were both of us, like all these people. This law firm is the same, this real estate company is the same, this bank's the same. Like, what? Like, there's something bigger going on here. But anyways, so yeah, so we tried to fight through the courts and stuff, and they won't listen to you. You submit papers and they throw them out. There's even a Canley document from Alberta, and they make up charges all the time. Like, it started in Swift Current. They made up extra charges that I was fleeing from them when I wasn't. I was doing 40K, and I stopped for them, but they disappeared. And in Alberta, I challenged the any government person that came on my property. If I tell you to leave, you better leave, right? I'd have no problem if you have business to do here, but you need to do it properly. And they wouldn't accept that. They needed to go full communism on you, and then they make up charges, and then you're back in the courts again. So there's a Canley document from a judge in Alberta that said the RCMP can come on my property anytime they want for any reason. And he did that because he threw out my testimony on the stand. He threw out my paperwork evidence, and he only listened to the government agents. So
Sorry, let
this
me
is,
let me jump in. There's a lot there. So
yeah,
I was
sorry.
I was building up a whole bunch of follow-up questions. Let's go back to the pharmacy where you originally got arrested for not having a mask. Can you walk the audience through exactly what happened and then the way that they took you in? It was very devious in my mind.
Oh, I missed that part. Yeah, okay. So when I went to the pharmacy, I walked through the door with my son, and the cosmetic lady asked if I put a mask on. I said no, thank you. nicely. And then I walked a couple more steps. She said something else, and oh, she asked for the doctor's note if I wasn't going to wear a mask, and I said I don't have to give you that. Like, no thanks. And I kept on going, and went to the pharmacy in the back, and one pharmacist would help me, then the other one said they can't, and then the manager's yelling at me, like harassing me about the mask thing and threatening to call the police, and then she threatened to phone the RCMP, and she phoned the manager, and I just, it turned out I was at the wrong pharmacy, so I left the store, but I stopped at the exit door, and I know my rights. I didn't want to interfere with their business or cause any harm to anyone. So all I asked, and she's like 200 meters away. So yeah, it sounded like yelling. Um, all I asked her was, "Why are you harassing me? Like, what is this all about? Like, you can't make me wear a mask. Like, this is ridiculous." And then I left. And while I was sitting in my truck and texting my son because he had left after they had said they're going to phone the police, so he started walking to his cousin's place, and I was going to catch up with him later. And I asked him, keep an eye out in case they did call the police. I don't, at this point in time, I didn't believe that would even come for this. This is retarded. Anyways, I was sitting in my truck, and yeah, two police come and they start knocking on my window and say I'm under arrest for uh, causing a disturbance. And I laughed. Like, it's just, I laughed at them because, first of all, it's a summary thing. So they have to actually see you doing something. And they can't just take someone saying that I did something. That's not the arrestable offense. And plus,
It's hearsay, right?
yeah, it's hearsay. It's not an arrestable offense. And it even said that in the disclosure. It wasn't a pursuable offense, but yet they did. So, anyways, after I left the parking lot, I was parked in my truck. So another part of the law is if I was doing a vehicle, something wrong with my vehicle on a roadway, then they'd have reason to stop me, but not in a parking lot, just sitting in my truck. Like, what? So, anyways, I left the parking lot, and I thought they're probably going to pull me over, like, likely. And my family used to own a motel on Service Road right next door, and there's no stopping signs all along it. You're not allowed to stop on the service road. And so I went down about 2 blocks down, and I turned off a side road, and then I pulled over. And as soon as I pulled over, the police turned off. They didn't pursue me anymore. So, okay, fine. I see my son just down the way a little bit. So I go and pick him up, and I went to the proper pharmacy, which was about 11 blocks downtown, not far away. And when I get to the other pharmacy in the parking lot, I go to open my door, and I'm surrounded by a SWAT team of RCMP. There's 10 cars and cops. They started pulling out their guns and yelling at me. And I'm like, this is nuts. What? And I was yelling at them through the window, like, what are you doing? Put your freaking gun away. Like, this, you're nuts. What are you doing? And I found out in the disclosure after that they knew who I was. They knew I had no criminal record, no record at all, no tickets, nothing. I had proper insurance and everything on my vehicle. Um, and so it's not that they didn't know who I was, and I sure as hell wasn't a dangerous person to them. So me, and meanwhile, my son was 14 at the time. He's sitting next to me, filming this a little bit, and there's actually a parking lot full of people. The parking lot was full, and there was another person. I saw it on Facebook later on, and at that time, I posted things right on Facebook all the time, and that really um, angered the RCMP. And so, I mean, on Facebook though, I was the one being berated. I'm the one that I did something wrong. I'm like, this, like, we know now what was going on, but at the time, it was like, it's just craziness. But so, anyways, they put me in the back of a cop car, and I'm thinking later, even for them to pull out a gun. in a full parking lot. That's just nuts too. Like they put everybody's.
Let me stop you before getting into what happens next. This is for my own interest. Did the SWAT team, did they have their face covered or like balaclavas?
They all are all wearing masks. Yeah.
I did an interview with Sean Buckley and he pointed this out. He's like, how did we ever get to a place in Canada where the police can cover their face? Like that's something that only a terrorist or military should do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I remember what they're wearing to this day. They weren't wearing all RCMP uniforms. They had like green military style sweaters on, and this was April. It's still kind of winter out, April, spring, and yeah, it's no, they weren't dressed like they used to back when they were RCMP and did what they were supposed to do or we expected them to do. No, this is different kind of people. But I guess
Another question. Like what do you think's going through their mind? Because I've been in Canada since 1989, and at some point the country switched from being a normal country to being what it is now. So what do you think was going in their mind? Like, hey, Jimmy, this lady wasn't wearing a mask at the pharmacy. All right, let's call in a SWAT team and let's point semi-automatic rifles at her. Like what was going through their minds?
I have no freaking idea. This is just it is so out in left field for I've never been through that before. I've never been surrounded by 10 cop cars like over a mask. Really, you guys? But the judge that he has a case on Canley as well, and he snagged someone else for not wearing a mask, and this was a man, and he fought back. He was surrounded by 20 employees harassing him, and he fought back. So they put him in jail for 6 months. The same judge, and it's interesting to read. And then you can kind of see where the cops' heads were and where they're getting this ridiculousness from. It's from higher up. So this judge, these are my words, but I mean, you can go and look up his case. It's Carl P. Bazin was the judge, and he stated in there that he went on for a couple of paragraphs explaining about how how hard it is for the retail employees to have to enforce these COVID mask measures, and we should be more uh, understanding to what they're going through. And like, this guy's a wacko. Like, what? They're not. It's not their job to enforce anything, anyways. Like, what? And so
Something's gone wrong over the years with these judges. It's not even activism at this point. It's not their role to weigh in on these things. Like they're just supposed to look at the evidence and make an objective ruling. But at this point,
exactly.
he's saying like, I don't want to live in this on a planet with someone like Shelly who disagrees with me, so I'm going to throw her in jail for 6 months.
Well, and in his Canley document about this other guy, he put in there that he thought it was appropriate if we don't have any trouble at the courthouse because we have armed guards, we have guns, so no one disobeys us here. But if we could do this for the if it was legal for the retailer staff to do it, then it'd be okay for them at gunpoint. He wanted people to be held at gunpoint. So hey, that kind of adds up with what they did to me. It's like, wow, buddy. And yeah, and through
Oh.
that's what I've learned through all this 3 4 4 years of this crap too with the courts is that the judges are imparting their ideologies instead of following the law, which is their job. Their only job is to interpret the law, and instead they're invoking um, the narrative of the government of the day. And in the last year or so, I've learned through, like, if you look to other judges of what's been going on, like with the Coots guys, how they override a jury trial, jury's decision, and so there's a whole bunch of factors that are involved in how they've gotten away with this to impart an ideology on the public.
Yeah, the Coots thing is just that's above and beyond. I don't know if I want to go there today, but you said it's their job to basically rule on the law. Like, what is the law here? You didn't put a mask on. You and I were talking about this offline. Like, if I punch you in the face, that's whatever assault, abuse, or whatever you want to call it, force.
It's a
Not,
harm.
it's a harm, but like not wearing a mask. What is the legal issue that justifies police officers pulling over a woman?
There's none.
Yeah, but like the judge has to come up with something. Like, what did he say in trial? It's a
They
na
under their scope of things, because there was a mandate from the health authority. That is the law. That's how they imparted it. That's what came out of him. And at the time with the mask thing, I wasn't familiar with the legalese court system, so I hired a lawyer, and he didn't do his job either. Like this was, they're all set up, and I learned later from one of the lawyers that took part in the inquiry, the civil inquiry that Buckley and a bunch of other lawyers.
the National Citizens Inquiry.
That's it, yeah. And I actually hired one of those lawyers from Saskatchewan, and he told me there was only three lawyers in Saskatchewan that took on any COVID type of case at all, and that's why I couldn't find a lawyer at the time. Like that's how did the government do this?
My a lot of my friends are lawyers, and I talk to them, off the record, and they agree that this is bad, and they say it's outrageous that none of our law firms will take it on, but they can't do anything because they have so many government clients,
Yeah.
and if they support the freedom movement, they'll lose whatever other clients they have, so they're scared as well.
Well, they should be even more scared now because it's gonna bite them in the ass, I think. They, well, they're supposed to be supporting the public, right? I mean, who do you work for? Yeah, yeah. But again, I can see it from their point of view as well. Not that I agree with it, but I mean, they've been threatened too to lose their bar cards if they go off.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not excusing their actions. This is
No,
just their mindset. They're like, well,
yeah,
we're gonna lose our clients. We won't get into the exclusive country clubs, and I can't put my
yeah,
son through a private school. That's their
yeah,
thinking.
yeah. I know it's yeah, but at the time, like how it takes a long time to figure out how they did it, right? Because it seems it's just like how did they do this? It's insane.
So let's go back to one thing you said. The mortgage thing. If I understand you correctly, you tried to pay your mortgage, and the bank's like, nah, we're not going to accept it, and because of that, they say you didn't pay your mortgage, so they took your house.
Well, yeah, this is from my hometown. So, um, oh, after they did what they did to my husband, I was pretty belligerent with all of them, and whenever there was something questionable happening, of course I questioned it. But with the bank, yeah, like I was 1 month behind, I think it was, and it was because they withheld my money. They wouldn't give me access to my money. And at the time, I thought, well, there's a time limit, right? It's 2 months and you'll get paid up, right? With the mortgage thing. And they knew it. Like, there's no risk here. You're going to get your money. But then 2 months go by, and then I got the paperwork on how to release my money. But the bank told me that I couldn't, and I wasn't allowed to have it. But it turned out he lied. I should have had that money within 2 days, and there would have never been a default in the mortgage. So they withheld my money knowingly, negligently, in order to default my mortgage. And at the
And
time, I was dealing with a husband that had just been murdered. In my mind, he'd been murdered because they starved him to death in the hospital, and there's a whole lot of guilt going on there. And then I have to deal with these retards. So then I started to sue the bank for negligence. And then the lawfare started with the RCMP again. They attacked me for other things, and this is how they did it. So with the mask situation, and again, I hired a lawyer, so I thought it was all taken care of, right? It turned out that fleeing from the cops gets you an automatic suspension on your license. But according to my lawyer, didn't tell me this, and the court never told me this, the judge. So I'm been driving around for a year, not knowing. But you know what? I think they just did it one day and just didn't tell me, and they can impart this anytime they want to because they've been flip flopping with my license for 4 years now. I get it fixed, And then they suspend my license again for some other stupid reason. They just, I don't know, they send a notice into uh, the driver's license registry, and they get it suspended for an administrative suspension. Well, what the hell does that mean? I don't know. And
Wait,
then
wait,
it,
wait. I got to stop you again. Let's go all the way back. Withholding, sorry, there's so much. Withholding your funds. What does that mean? Is that a freeze?
well, I had pension funds and I was allowed to take them out immediately. And but the banker told me I couldn't. So he lied to me.
Why was it the government told the bank to not let you take your pension money out?
I don't know. I have no proof to that. All I know is the bank did it.
Okay, that's really strange.
And well, here's another little piece to the puzzle. I've done lots of research. I know where they're coming from. So this bank, Innovation Credit Union in Swift Current, Saskatchewan, has been trying for years to get themselves status as a federal bank. So like across Canada, right? So it was last year June they just got their federal status from Chrystia Freeland herself. Lawyer told me I'm on the list. Okay, I'm targeted. Chrystia Freeland's giving this bank kudos. The same, and this bank was all involved in the COVID fraud too. And so, yeah, I think there's a targeted persons list out there.
And the other, so I get what the withholding part means now. The other part, you said the lawfare from the RCMP, where when you say they say that you fled from the police, this is when you just left the parking lot of the pharmacy?
Yeah, they charged him with fleeing from a cop, and even Judge Bazin, he's like he was questioning, and there's a plea deal made, and but this judge still wanted to continue on with like a trial, like a mini trial, and the plea deal had been accepted, and he was upset that I didn't get 6 months in jail for fleeing from a cop. And then he goes, well, it's you're only giving her a $500 fine. Like he was upset with this. And then he went on to ask, well, how fast was she going? Well, like 40, 50K. And the judge goes, so she wasn't really breaking any laws? No. And in their disclosure, it said I pulled over, but the cop went the other direction. And it also said in the disclosure from the cop, it said it was not pursuable. So yeah, this judge did something nasty because he could. And I read through the Transportation Act or whatever the act is that concerns fleeing a cop, and I phoned Alberta because I have an Alberta driver's license. They suspended an Alberta driver's license via Saskatchewan. I'm like, how do you guys do this? You have no
This is
jurisdiction in
this is what I
Alberta.
was going to talk about. Like, it seems like good intentions. So, let's come up with the concept of a driver's license. And everyone's, a couple of guys complaining that's a property rights violation. I should be able to, enjoy my car. They're like, no, no, no. We want to vet who's driving. And then they centralize it in the power in the hands of the government. And now, like, if you're law enforcement, you can just shut off people's access to their car. You can shut off their access to healthcare. You can shut off
Yeah,
access to their mortgage. Like, so this has gotten away from us right now, where the government. This is what people mean when they say the government's working against the people now.
yeah, and it takes a lot to figure out how they did it, like how and we need to understand how they did it in order to fight back, right? And so you go through I went through, and I know lots of others have gone through the process of learning legalese and how to fight in the courts and to represent yourself, and then it leads in there's a big learning curve. And at the end of it, I've learned that the statutes aren't really law, and the provincial courts across Canada can be proven, and I have proven with their own with the Constitution that they don't have the judges in provincial courts don't have the authority. They're statute court, okay, so they don't have the authority of inherent jurisdiction. They have limited. It's a limited jurisdiction court.
Can you break that down in simple terms?
So the way that they're getting away with it is the judges, and I've heard this from judges and crown prosecutors, they believe they're making the law. And if you go and look up news stories about Judge Wagner, so he was involved in the convoy things, right? and he's the Supreme Court judge, right? And he's said that he's made a statement in news stories saying that the judges make the law. That's a lie, and it's very incorrect. But that's what they believe, and that's what they call case law. Okay, so that's what they're using these statutes for. Statutes are administrative, and you also have to bring into the picture how the government works. So there's three branches, right? Judicial, administrative, and legislative. And because of these statutes kind of bring all the branches of government and merge them. And where a judge makes the law, there we've merged the legislative. That's what the problem is with these provincial administrative courts, because the majority of infractions that they find go through the provincial courts first. And then they charge you with these ridiculous things, and you have to fight your way out of what? You can't, because you're already guilty before you even get there. You can't fight your way out. You have to enter a plea deal because the statute, and this is why I bring up Coots, because they made it so you can't. There's only one outcome here, and it's you're guilty. Even did you follow the statute or didn't you? Well, no one can follow the statute, and just make stuff up.
Sorry, when you say statute, do you mean like the judge's ruling?
No, a statute is like the criminal code. Mostly comes out of the criminal code, right?
So statute, you're using that interchangeably with like legislation?
Yeah,
Okay. This is how I interpret what's going on. I'm going to give you like a really dumbed down example. Let's say the law says that if anyone stabs someone, they go to jail for 10 years. And if I stab you with like a toothbrush or a wooden spoon, then the judge will make a decision and be like, well, I think that still constitutes stabbing, even though it's a blunt object. And then that becomes precedent, right? Precedent
yeah,
law. So that
yeah.
that I'm okay with, the judge making that decision. But if I come to you and I say, Shelly, you've got a big nose and it's a piercing insult, and you go and you take your own life that evening, well, that law that then if the judge says, well, that's also considered a stabbing because he pierced her, verbally causing death, and that's no longer precedent. That's creating a new law. That's
Well,
hate
that's
speech.
what they're
Yeah.
doing. They're
That's what
creating
I'm trying to
things.
say. It's hate
Yeah,
speech legislation passed through the judiciary.
yeah. But they've been given full reign to do this, right, by the Supreme Court judge. If the Supreme Court judge has got your back, then that's what we're going to do. But we always, throughout this whole thing, what got me is that there's got to be a good one somewhere. One of these judges and prosecutors has to, you know, be reasonable. But no, I haven't found one yet.
Well, Mosley comes to mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the Mosley decision, yeah, it was kind of that was half-assed. I mean, they still left the door open to do the mandates again. It's just that the Dina Hinshaw, the medical officers aren't allowed to do it, right?
Yeah, I read the Mosley decision. I'm kind of hawkish on individual rights, and I'm glad of the outcome that they
Yeah,
slapped down Trudeau, but the way it was worded, the
yeah.
Mosley kind of said like, "Hey, government, my hands are tied. Based on your own rules, what you did was illegal. But if you want to do this again, here's my advice: change these three things, and you can push through an emergency act next time. Godspeed." That's how
Right.
I. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And everybody was cheering him on. I guess it's a temporary victory, but I'm like, guys, this is not Spartacus here.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then that's where, where I'm at right now is using the Constitution and reinvoking or invoking our rights. And it's difficult because you have to learn how they got this far to subvert our rights. How did they do this? And it seems to me, and if you read through the Constitution and what Pierre Trudeau did, so he invoked the charter, right, and made it sound like it's for the betterment of our rights, when in actuality, it's the very first part, 1A, which uh, converts our rights into privileges and benefits. And that's the problem. They're converting our rights, our God given inherent rights. And that's the problem with the provincial courts. They're not constitutional courts. They can't hear your rights. That's why they don't listen to you. You mean you submit things, you talk, you go, you testify, a jury. They still don't have to listen to your rights because they're not a constitutional court. So here we go, right? And then I remember my experiences, and the judges always said, "Well, you can do a charter challenge," and they always pushed the charter challenge, and it never felt quite like the right thing to do. But I never knew why in the beginning. I do now because it limits and transfers and converts your rights into privileges that fall under the statute.
Yeah,
A
government
statute.
loves getting more power at our expense. What do you mean when you say the provincial courts are not constitutional courts?
Because they don't, if you read the constitution, and it comes out of section 96 and I think 92.14 as well, but 96, section 96 of the constitution, and I refer to the 1867 constitution because the 1982 one is unconstitutional. They're converting our rights. They have no authority to do that, no power to do that. And so if you follow the 1867 constitution, it states in there their laws that a constitutional court is one where the judge is appointed by the uh, governor general, and they're not. They're appointed by the province.
Are you sh
So, yes, I'm
Oh,
sure.
I see what you mean. The federal I thought that the prime minister through the minister of justice appoints all courts except for the very lowest one.
Well, and see, there's a part in the Constitution of exclusive jurisdiction. So that doesn't give the government the power to transfer exclusive jurisdiction over something to another party. They can't. It's exclusive. What's the definition? You have to go by definitions as well. So, they're putting their own spin on things too, but you can hold them to it because you can't defy exclusive by giving this power that is exclusive to the federal government to something else. They can't, but they are. They think they are.
So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, um, I forget the judge's name, the one that was on the Artur Pawlowski case.
Oh, Rook. Yes, he's a piece of work.
Yeah, I heard this guy's a, I shouldn't trash talk judges. They'll probably send the RCMP here. This wonderful human being. You said that you know somebody that took him down, or what was that about?
There's actually been many people that have challenged Judge Rook. And there's a fellow down in the States. I can't quite remember his name right now, but yeah, they put him in jail for 50 days as well. And he challenged Rook. This was years ago, like 10, 15 years ago now. And then there's a lady by the name of Sandra Anderson. She's in the news. Um, and there's been quite a few others. And Arthur Pawlowski and Dr. Makis as well. He took on and Rook, and then suddenly Rook retires. I think the heat got a little too much for him, but the thing with not doctor with Judge Rook is I did lots of research into him, and some other people's names came up as well, and they tied into, get this, the Canada Anti-Hate Network.
Yeah,
So mm, that wonderful organization, yeah.
yeah, the
um
PR arm of the Trudeau administration.
yeah, so it turns out Judge Rook, along with this other I think he's a fake lawyer, Donald Needlitsky. His name's getting pretty famous out there too, but him and Rook were the two that worked on the Meads versus Meads case. And the importance of this Meads case is it was put in place just prior, like a year or two before COVID. So it was put in place to subvert our access to the courts. So anyone that wants to self-represent, Needlitsky and Rook have this case law now to kick us out of the courts, because from that ruling, they can call us names like, I can't remember the words, but it's OPCA, vexatious litigants, They actually deem us as scary, dangerous people. Paper terrorists, that's another name. So and they've all you can find this online if you search Needlitsky, and he does circular references to his own reports to justify the Meads versus Meads case law. It's retarded.
You hit the mute button. You're muted. You're muted. Can you hear me? Why are we having technical issues all day today? Um, I didn't mute you. Ask to unmute. Can I unmute you?
There, is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry,
It's
I'm using
okay.
my phone. It's yeah, hard not for your ear not to do things sometimes. But anyways, the Needlitsky and Judge Rook thing, yeah, the Meads versus Meads was a setup to keep us out of the courts. So how does Canada Anti-Hate work into this? There's another guy, but in the name of Warman, and his claim to fame is defamation cases. He likes to win defamation cases, but he's also a member of Canada Anti-Hate Network, and he wrote reports with Needlitsky. So come on, these people have been at this for quite a long time. To
Let me ask you about your opinion on anti-hate. Do you think it's a far left Marxist organization that wants to crush right-wing people, or do you think it's a government program as long as they just want to increase the power of the government and they don't care, like the conservatives are getting in, that they'll just do it with a conservative leaning next time?
well, if Wikipedia, you can look up Warman, and it tells you right there what they're into. It's Black Lives Matter and Antifa. He was convicted. He's part of that. This Warman guy. So if the government supports, and they're deemed a terrorist organization in the U.S. and probably other countries, but I know the U.S. for sure. If our government in Canada, um, hires that, and of all the other things that they associate themselves with, terrorist organizations, and I mean, it's in the news now. There's 350 terrorist organizations within Canada, like operating and unabated, and
Does that include
yeah,
Jagmeet Singh?
yeah,
Uh,
right. We have terrorists in our own government, Gibo. Well, come on, like this is they were placed there. Yeah, it looks like to me, and their use of lawyers and the people within the law society, yeah, they're doing it deliberately to oppress the people. So there's no dissent, right? And we can see by the measures that they've taken, it just gets increasingly control driven, and they use intimidation and uh, and jail, and look at what they did to Pastor Art and others. They put them in jail. They put pastors in jail. Like, come on.
Pastor Pavlovsky, he told me that he's the first person in Canada to be charged under that terrorism bill for, I think it's
Yeah,
for
that's
blocking critical infrastructure.
they block any critical infrastructure. The RCMP did, but yeah, that's how they work, right? They lie.
Yeah, but in case someone isn't aware, that's the charge. What he did was he gave a sermon. Now,
Yeah,
whether you agree with that sermon or not, I don't know how you draw a connection from that to terrorism.
right. Yeah, or driving over a pylon. Like, how is that trying to hit someone? Like,
You're
this
talking about
is
the Coots?
yeah,
Yeah,
those
yeah.
poor guys. That's horrible. And
Um,
with
you,
my and even my family, like they couldn't read they took him um off a parking lot of a truck stop in a vehicle he was sleeping in. There's no way that they had any reasonable probable cause of anything. So when they knocked on his window, they said that um they thought the truck was stolen because it looked like similar vehicles that were used in thefts and blah blah blah. And no, but I learned after because they phoned me because my plate was on that vehicle, and I didn't realize my cousin had left it on there. But anyways, so when the police phoned me from Airdrie, he said, "Oh, there's a big red flag beside your name." I said, "Oh, really?" what that might that incur? Like, what's going on? So it's like, yeah, it's still targeted. Thanks.
Yeah, what's happened to our country? Um,
It's,
One question about the judges. You and I talked about this yesterday. I firmly believe that the judges, they think that they're not evil. Like they think that what they're doing, that's in the best interests of society. I don't think that they realize how much damage they're doing to the, Western liberal uh, societies.
oh no, they know what they're doing.
You think that they know that they're evil?
Yeah, because and this is why they've written reports and their case laws and stuff. And if you read enough about, what they've their statements, their own words, one, they know that the Constitution is in conflict with their legalese statutes. And and that's why they have provincial courts of their statute courts, right? Administrative statute courts.
Right, right.
And
But
that,
what I mean is, in their mind, the charter, sorry, the Constitution, the common law, this principle of God-given rights, the family unit, that's wrong. Christianity, that's wrong. The right way forward is secularism, it's multiculturalism, it's the welfare state, and they're the ones that are fixing. Like I think they think that the truckers are all dumb
yeah,
hicks because they're self-sufficient.
and they really believe we're terrorists.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think I do believe they have that in their brains. It's hard to fathom that someone thinks that way, but I mean, we can see it quite a bit in public. But if you look up the criminal code, and I found it somewhere online in 1972, and it's a WikiLeaks explanation. No, not WikiLeaks. It's something else that explains um what the criminal code when it was instituted and what some amendments and stuff and why. And in it, it says that the criminal code is based on like their statutes and stuff in the courts are based on um uh society's we
I
have to
see.
conform to what society wants us to.
You mean this is
So
for the like it's in the best interest of society kind of thing?
for the greater good, yeah, that
Yeah.
communist
I'll
manifesto kind of
I'll
thing.
bring
Yeah.
it I'll bring it up while you're talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's part of the communist manifesto. So that, it kind of lines up with what Pierre Trudeau did with the charter, and I think it was 72 that the criminal code, I think it's from the law library online. I think that was the site. But yeah, if you read through the history of the criminal code and where it comes from and why and what they're trying to accomplish, it's for societal norms. That's what they're going on. That's why they're saying that the criminal code is in place, and that's the purpose of it.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen.
And
But
then
you, yep.
and then also back when the criminal code was first implemented, it was in that website too. It should say somewhere that the common law is they threw out the common law, and
Right.
then the
Let me read this. This is the one you say you put a post out on this. The
yeah,
audience can see this, but I'll read it for you. Historically, criminal law has treated crime as a wrong against the community rather than against the individual victim. As a result, the individual victims of a crime have often felt outside the criminal justice process. The 1996 legislation amended the sentencing provisions of the criminal code. The courts are now required, when deciding an offender's sentence, to consider, I can't read the bottom part, but basically whatever impacted the victim. I think you put this when I did that interview with Michael Jackson, and he was talking about how his wife did a sob story for the judge where she had to lie down and cry.
yeah.
Uh, before 1996, you did not consider the emotions of the victim. You just looked at the crime. Is this correct?
Yeah, and that's a big part of it too. Like the problem with the statutes is they don't require a victim. They don't require a harm. And look at the Coots guys. There's no harm done. There's no victim. You just you broke a statute. How can you break a statute? Like really? But that's what they started with the criminal code and the statutes. And that was, that was for the greater good. You don't need a victim anymore. And that's what common law required in the beginning. That's what common law required, is a victim and a harm. And they've done away with that, which is, no, we need to bring back the victim and harm point of things, not statutes.
Do you know a gentleman by the name of Doug Force?
I've recognized the name. I think I've looked something up about him. Yeah.
He's an anarcho-capitalist and he's a big natural rights, my words, he's a big natural rights proponent.
Hmm.
And I interviewed him and he said the same thing. He said under common law, you have to have a victim. If there's no victim, you can't have a law.
Right. It's true. So that's how they've gotten away with overreaching government controls, right? You don't need a victim. If you just do something against what the government says, then you're now a criminal in their eyes. And that's the
Uh,
problem.
what about again, I'm reading one of your last posts. This thing, Elliot Trudeau, the amendments to the criminal law of 1968, 1961. So there's some controversial ones, like they decriminalized homosexual acts, but they legalized abortion, contraception, and they legalized gambling, lotteries. And then they restricted gun ownership and they authorized breathalyzer tests on people drivers.
Yeah. So they can stop you for any reason. That's another ridiculous law.
Yeah, but I
That
mean, like
gives
there's a couple of things in there that they're controversial. So I let's just stay away from that, like homosexual sex and abortion. But then they bring in all this crap that what the hell, like restrictions on guns and
right.
breathalyzers.
And but I took a screenshot of that in particular because it leads to Pierre Trudeau again. Like what? This guy's a known communist. I mean, he was part of the communist regime back then. I was pretty young then, and I didn't. I mean, I heard my father complain about him all the time, right? But I didn't realize what party he was from, or the depths of what Pierre Trudeau was. And now I do. He's a communist, and he was trying to impart communism and the steps. He's laying the groundwork for it for later on. That's what it, in my opinion of it.
Yeah, I'm really critical of these roadside tests. Like you haven't done anything wrong, but you're obligated to blow into a breathalyzer. And
Yeah, and if you refuse, they take you to jail.
yeah,
What?
and it just seems it's one of those things where it's very easy for them to bring this in because you get the mothers on board because mothers don't want drunk drivers killing their
Yeah.
children. And I sound like I don't know, a heartless bastard when I say like, no, man, like it's not that I want people to drive drunk. It's just find another way to, wait until you see somebody swerving on the road and then arrest them.
So here's the issue that you can bring up with that, a constitutional one, is averting your right to due process, which is a constitutionally protected right. So, I mean, that is one way you can fight it because you're guaranteed due process.
I'll try that, but I have a feeling it'll bounce off these people.
Of course it
That
will, but
it leads into a whole other issue, like seatbelts. If I want to
mhm,
take my life into my own hands, like why
yeah,
is it a crime that me not wearing a seatbelt doesn't impact anybody else around me?
it's a crime to statute. Yeah, but there's no victim and there's no harm. And same with speeding. I mean, if they can find, and I've read into it a lot and had the same questions as you, like where do you draw the line? Like some guy doing 200K on a highway. I mean, that's not okay, right? I mean, there's no victim and there's no harm, but if there were people on the road, yeah, then there's a problem. If there's nobody on the road and it's just him, what's the problem? If you could,
Yeah, yeah, I see where you're going with that.
yeah,
Like Saskatchewan, you've been to Saskatchewan, obviously. They have that highway, which I think is the best highway in the world. It's the only one where like the other side of the highway is like 50 kilometers away. Like you can't even see it.
right,
You could do like 300 kilometers on that highway. There's nobody around.
yeah, yeah, exactly. What's the problem? And they've taken away our ability to self-regulate. Yeah, I remember I was a kid when they brought in the seatbelt laws, and I think I got two or three of them before I was like, all right, fine. I can't afford it anymore. And no, I didn't believe it back then either. I don't think I should have to wear a seatbelt. And
it's getting out of control now. You if you don't wear a seatbelt in your car, that car chime goes off and it gets progressively louder. Like it never stops. So when I'm driving, I'm in Whistler. When I'm driving to Vancouver, my dog is sitting on this passenger seat. It just goes on and on. It's like an hour and a half drive with this thing, getting PTSD.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
with Uber now, you sit in the back seat, and if you don't have your seatbelt on, it's like, would you like to put your seatbelt on? I'm like, no, man, I don't want to put my seatbelt on. I'm a
No, thank
grown
you.
man. Yeah, thanks for the tip.
But still, yeah, it's like the mask thing. The little mask Nazis, they still think they have that same control, right? And it's probably, I don't think it's working out the same for them anymore, except the RCMP and the police. Like with my cousin, with his thing, they had no authority to even knock on his window. The truck was not reported stolen, and you can't claim reasonable and probable grounds to you didn't see him, you didn't know who it was, you had no reason to go up and knock on his window. No complaint was filed. So yeah, where do we draw the line? So the cop goes up, opens the door without a warrant, and then he creates things. So then they find things in the truck, and then they find out that Shelly is attached to this truck. So then that makes it even more fun. They just they in and we're trying to fight this, and it's not going so well with the Constitution because they don't have to do anything. There's no accountability. They know it. We know it. They don't have to let them go.
Do you know Dinesh D'Souza?
Yes, that's a good guy to follow. Yeah.
He had a fascinating story about how they compound these charges. He goes, he accidentally donated $10,000 from his company instead of his personal account.
Oh,
That's
right.
what
Yeah.
that's what he went to jail for. So they're hitting him and they're like, by the way, you committed bank fraud. And he's like, what are you talking about bank fraud? They're like, you took that check out of a bank. So it's also bank fraud. And then they're
Oh,
like, you committed mail fraud. He's like, what do you mean mail fraud? It's like you put the check in the mail and you sent it to, to the headquarters. So they're hitting him with it's the same crime, but they're hitting him with multiple charges. And I've seen them do it in Canada too. It's it's
yes.
it's like a game for them.
Yeah, they throw a whole bunch of charges at the wall, and they know only one, maybe one will stick. But which one we don't know. But we're gonna throw a whole bunch at the wall just to see.
Yeah, but
Like,
like when you were a kid, like let's say you broke a vase and your dad would come spank you, that he'd spank you for breaking that vase. He wouldn't spank you for breaking the vase and then spank you again for, shattering glass on the carpet and then spank you for like the water falling out of the
yeah.
vase, like it's
Well,
the
even
same crime.
right, and even the seatbelt tickets. Yeah, okay. So they gave me a seatbelt ticket a couple of times, but nowadays, now they have to go search your vehicle, and then they decide you're resisting arrest and you've done this, and they make up all this other shit to go along with it. And like, why? Don't know.
Resisting arrest. Yeah, that's a cute one. All right. Well, I don't know. I guess we should end it. This was a really fun conversation. It was interesting bashing the government. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody wants to bash the government, but they they've done too many things that they're not accountable for, and now it feels like to me anyways that they're laughing at us because there is no accountability. And the only way out of this that I can see is to keep challenging them, whatever the price that they've started to leave me alone, but now they have my family, so I mean, whatever. I
You
someday I
know,
want a better place for my kid. You know how I grew up. It was a lot. There was freedom then, at least a little bit more.
man, I would say there was a lot more when I came here in the 90s, 89. But I remember my uncle came from Iran just to visit us, and we gave him our car, and he was speeding. He was doing something like 220, 230 kilometers on the highway, and the cop pulled him over. All he did is he didn't speak English. He took his finger and he put it on where the speedometer was, like 110. Said keep it
Yeah,
below that, and he let him off with a warning. Today, that would be like you'd be in jail for Lord knows how
months.
long,
Yeah,
months. Your license is
yeah,
gone. They impound your vehicle. You got to pay for that. It's just a nightmare.
yeah, yeah. I agree. The '90s were a fun time.
The good old days.
We'll get her back.
All right. Well, Shelly, thank you very much for coming on. and I'll have this interview up in a few hours, and you can share it.
Right on. Good time. Thank you.
Take care and hang in there. Things will get better.
Yeah, you betcha.
Bye.